You're watching Exit 1055 with your host, Richard Rose.
We begin with the toxic tide rolling in on Long Island's East End, and it's a growing danger. TV 1055's Jennifer McLogan has more on the so-called rust tide.
A toxic rust tide has returned to fragile wildlife estuaries and saltwater bays of the East End. An organism that turns the clear blue tint into a murky orange and brown hue can now be spotted along Peconic, Shinnecock, and Flanders shores.
It's highly lethal. It can kill fish within a matter of hours. It can kill shellfish in a matter of days. So it releases a toxin that's very, very potent.
Stony Brook professor Christopher Gobler is studying the effects of the rusty water on shellfish.
Now, the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, we tried to get some reaction from them, but the department says it cannot comment on charges that it's not doing enough to protect Long Island waterways because of a pending lawsuit over that very issue. Joining us now is environmentalist Jennifer Juengst.
That's very nice to be here. Thank you.
Is there agreement that it's nitrogen from fertilizers and pesticides that's causing the toxic tide?
Absolutely. The scientists have finally caught up to what Mother Nature's been telling us, and that is that there's way too much nitrogen coming out of our sewage, as well as fertilizers and pesticides that are being used on our lawns and our farmland. Has trickled down and is making a mess, and Mother Nature's giving us signals all throughout the island, all of our waterways, interior lakes, streams, and coasts.
Well, we'll go through that, but you know, we mentioned the lawsuit and that we couldn't get a comment from the State Environmental Department. When I said, is there agreement, do you think there's agreement from the State Environmental Department about the causes?
Yes, I do believe that there is. There's enough science at all levels at this point to confirm.
But now, what about this lawsuit? Can you tell us more about that? Because, you know, normally you expect to get a response from the DEC, that's what they're called for short, and they usually do respond to us. But in this case, they say they can't talk because they're being sued over this very issue. What is that lawsuit?
Well, as far as I understand, the plaintiffs in that lawsuit commenced it to force the DEC to comply with the Federal Clean Water Act. These plaintiffs apparently feel that the state DEC is not doing enough to address the nitrogen levels that are causing all the trouble.
And DEC, again, standing for Department of Environmental Conservation. Correct. Now, we're talking about a lifestyle here. Here you see some of this this video that we have of the rust tide. And there's a lot of people contributing to this nitrogen buildup, a lifestyle. I'm talking about people with super green lawns, as you mentioned. You have boaters who dump waste in bays still, homeowners with cesspools that overflow often after storms. You got farmers competing in a multi-million-dollar industry to grow crops that consumers want, and they say that they want them to look good too, be nice, big, and ripe, and not have any marks or anything on them at all. They have to use these pesticides. I see a lot of resistance in a lot of different segments to any new tough standards.
Absolutely. And the agricultural community is actually having some divisions within itself. The Northeast Organic Farmers Association supports alternatives to pesticides and is doing very well with it. The organic farming community is a multi-million-dollar community on Long Island. Suffolk County is the #1 agricultural producer in New York State. Wine growers have switched over and said, no, these pesticides are bad enough. We have to go another way, and they're succeeding at it.
Well, I've talked with farmers who say, well, it may work for the wine growers, but it doesn't work for us. There's just too many pests that these organic pesticides don't kill.
You know what? We simply disagree. And in fact, the Long Island Clean Water Partnership is meeting within the next week with the farmers and those interests, and we are prepared to sit down and hash out those very issues. We'll bring our science to the table. They can bring theirs to the table. We have to have a very, very clear discussion. Well,
I had Joseph Gorgella on this show last month, and he's the head of the Long Island Farm Bureau, representing you know, all the farmers on the East End. And this is a huge industry that accounts for a big part of the state's economy, especially on Long Island. And he said, and I don't think he was joking, he says, well, you know, a lot of these are niche operations that are using organic pesticides. And, you know, as soon as some of these people have $10 million or the money that's needed to do a big farm operation, they can tell us how to run our business. Is that an attitude you run into frequently?
Yes, it's been that way with the Long Island Farm Bureau for too many years, and it has to change because the public wants clean, fresh food. The Farm Bureau and some of the farmers that follow the Farm Bureau's theories think that we have to choose between good, clean food and good, clean water, and the fact of the matter is we can't choose.
What about, will it raise the price? You know, consumers will say they want this, but then they'll buy the the product that saves the money.
You know what? That's changing too. Consumers are making better choices because they want cleaner food.
But let's take that up, because the consumers, I'll go out and interview them and they'll say, oh yeah, they should use organic pesticides. We do have too much nitrogen. And then you go to the house and they're just piling on the fertilizer and the lawn greening products to make sure that their lawn looks really super green. It's almost a competition in some neighborhoods.
Yeah, I agree with you, but that's because the public needs to be educated. You know, we don't get our water like New York City does from an obvious reservoir, where you wouldn't allow a boat to sit on a reservoir and water ski and all, because you know you're going to destroy your drinking water. But our water is under the ground. People don't see it. So if they don't see it, they don't understand it. Our job is to educate the public on what they're doing.
Well, it's been a weird summer. We've seen lots of strange effects. We've seen water chestnuts in Massapequa Lake. We've seen blue-green algae out at Lake Ronkonkoma. Lots of seaweed along the Shore Point Lookout in particular. Look at the kids playing with it right here. What is causing that? Also this?
That's also nitrogen inspired. There's simply too much nitrogen in our groundwater. Since the groundwater is everywhere throughout Long Island, the nitrogen is overwhelmingly impacting.
That looks like
a
field. That's right along the shore.
And the problem with that.
Feet thick. Well, there's so much more we could ask you, but you know, people, you can't avoid noticing that. We want to thank you for joining us, Jennifer Juengst, and thank you for coming in today.